Good afternoon. We welcome everyone to this electronic version of the West Valley City Council study meeting. We will begin with the electronic notice requirement. Pursuant to Utah Code, West Valley City has determined that this meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location given the ongoing novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. West Valley City has determined the pandemic presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at an anchor location. This meeting will be held electronically. Members of the press and public are invited to view this meeting live on YouTube at www.youtube.com/user/WVCTV. All right, we note that we have a full quorum. All council members are in attendance at this meeting. But as I'm looking here, our city manager's not on the list, or the assistant city manager. Well, our city recorder is. There's at least our assistant city recorder. Always good to have one of them on with us in case invariably we have questions, invariably. Let's see. With that, then we have our minutes of February 23rd. Motion on the minutes.
Move for approval of those minutes.
Second.
Okay, then without objection, the minutes will be approved. Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved unanimously. Next, we have our review of our regular meeting later tonight. There have been no changes to the items that are on there, although they did add another set of minutes. The minutes from our annual strategic planning meeting. So any questions there on our agenda for later tonight? Hearing none, then we'll move on. We do have a public hearing scheduled for next week. GPZ-1-2021. First one of that particular series filed by Alex Winder. General plan change from commercial office educational to light manufacturing, and a zone change from C2 general commercial to L1 or LI, I guess, light industrial. This is at 5718 West, 3500 South. To accomplish that, we have three items that we would consider. Ordinance 21-09 next week, Ordinance 21-10, and Resolution 21-35 that are all tied in with this. With that, then, we'll turn to seeing no one else. Wayne, for this,
Steve
I guess.
Patrick will be joining us soon, Mayor. Sorry about that.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council.
Oh, there it is.
So I'll share my screen and walk through this particular application. So this property you can see is the address 5718 West, 35th South. So about 5.4 acres. The property on this first slide is outlined in red, and it's located behind the existing commercial center there that's on the northwest corner of 5600 West and 35th South. While you can't see it on this map, the Mountain View corridor is directly west of this property. And it's well underway at this point in this section. As noted, the zoning right now is C2, and the requested zoning is light industrial. And then you can see the current general plan designation of commercial office and office education, and the switch to light industrial is the proposal. here's just a close-up just to orient the council. So the property to the north is actually a stormwater retention area for the commercial center to the east. Some of the tenants or users in the center include the Alpine Storage. There in the larger white portion of the building, you have a Vasa Fitness further south, and on the far south, you have the Salt Lake Community College with some pads around the perimeter. And then again, Mountain View Quarter that's to the west. So back in 2010, the city adopted the Hunter Town Center plan that was part of the general plan, and that plan was later updated in 2017. And so the property in question is in this area here on the west end. So you can see at the time there were two different designations or land use designations in the general plan at the time. And the plan also included a couple of concepts, if you will, showing how that area could potentially redevelop. So this was one scenario, and this next one is another scenario showing potential redevelopment of that northwest corner of the intersection. And of course, in both of these scenarios, it assumed that the Kmart building would be redeveloped. However, since that time, since this plan was put in place, the Kmart building, as the council knows, was converted into Alpine Storage. And so the redevelopment options here are pretty challenging given the recent reinvestment there. So the proposal here and the orientation is shifted. So the north is to the right on this particular drawing. So you can see the commercial center at the bottom of this image. So the concept here would be to develop a flex space or a mix of office warehouse type space that would be behind the commercial center or to the west of the commercial center. So this would be located between Mountain View Corridor and the commercial center. And the idea would be to have, for the most part, tenant spaces on both sides of the building within landscaping along Mountain View Corridor. Apologies for these images, but just thought it'd be important to point out that there is access to this property through the neighboring center. So what this highlights would be there is an access easement coming from 35th South to this property. So the image on the left just shows the center, and then it's essentially the same easement area, just without the aerial image on the right. And then there's also an access easement to the property from 5600 West that wraps around the Alpine Storage property. So that's how access is gained, even though the property doesn't have frontage on either of those streets. So again, just conceptually what's proposed would be, again, a flex industrial building. So this shows, again, conceptually what that would look like. Now, an important point that to bring up here is the light industrial zone actually has a provision that says that there wouldn't be overhead doors facing a major street. And so if you look at this next image, the purpose for that particular provision was this building in the middle is so not proposed here, but that's the typical type of industrial building we're seeing up near 201, where you have a lot of the loading bays or overhead doors on one side of the building. So we were trying to prevent something like that facing a major street. So given the fairly narrow shape of this building, the proposal here would be to allow a limited amount of overhead doors facing Mountain View Corridor by development agreement. And then that would be in exchange for providing some additional design enhancements on that west side of the building. So just for context, we included a few images. So this is the new 7-Eleven that's going in just east of Mountain View Corridor and north of 35th. So this would be south of the property. This is the looking at the property. So the fence that's on the left side of the image, the property's on the other side of the fence. And so the buildings on the right would be the existing commercial center. And this is looking to the south. Again, so now on the right, the fence there on the right is the eastern boundary of the subject property. And you can see again the Alpine storage building there on the left. And then finally, this is then looking at the property to the southwest. You can see out in the distance the Mountain View corridor with the overpass over 35th South. So again, just the property's vacant, of course, but gives you an idea of context here. So that summarizes the request.
Steve, has that fire hydrant been hanging out in the empty field for a long time?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when that was put in, but yeah, not sure why that ended up that way.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I remember Mr. Winder coming in some time ago on about storage units, I think. Is this the same property, or is that part of the Kmart or something there nearby?
So there was discussion in the past about doing self-storage on this property. However, so after the storage unit project went in the Kmart building, the council amended the code so that storage units were no longer allowed in the C2 zone. And so now the only zone that allows storage units is the M, or manufacturing zone. So it was discussed, but it was at a time when storage units would have been allowed under the current zoning, but they're no longer allowed under the current zoning.
And did he come in for a zone change at that time?
No, at the time, storage units would have been allowed under the zoning, but that was, if memory serves, his interest was before Alpine Storage came in on the Kmart property. And so now that they're there, I think he's no longer interested in pursuing storage units.
I understand that maybe that's no longer feasible for him, and we took the opportunity away from him. But if what he wanted to do was already allowed, he wouldn't have had to have come in. So I'm trying to understand or remember why he came in, what he was asking for, if we allowed that several years ago, or.
So there was interest in him doing storage units, and at the time, and there's a bit of history here, but at the time the city adopted the Hunter Town Center zone, there was the Hunter Town Center plan. There was discussion about having a new zone in place, and that new zone would have prohibited storage units, but that zone was not passed. So he could have done storage units before the council changed the code, but he just, and I don't recall why he chose not to eventually submit an application, but he did have that option up until the point where the code was amended.
So maybe he was then talking about what was it, the Hunter Town Center that we didn't pass. Maybe he was opposing that.
Right, and if I believe there was a time where, because of that process, we had in effect a moratorium where he would not have been able to apply until we got through that process.
Okay. So it seems to me that with the access and the location, this property is probably pretty difficult to develop. And although he could have put storage units there at one time and chose not to, is this something that if we adopt this, we have, I mean, it runs with the land, but are we confident that he'll be able to go forward, or this is going to be a good use for that area? What's staff's direction on this?
Sure. So and you may notice this in the meeting minutes, as we explored different options for land use as staff, we felt like the use is a good use for this particular property. And here are some of the considerations. So, with retail, we feel like it would be difficult because, and for similar reasons, office, because of how it's kind of located in behind this existing center, and the access is a bit awkward to get to it. Residential, so multifamily wouldn't even be an option because they don't meet the criteria. They have to have access and frontage on either 35th or 56, which they don't. So that's not an option. Plus, it wouldn't really be a great location in our mind, being behind this commercial center. So there's really not we don't really see a great residential use here, retail or office. Again, given that some of the limitations of the property would be difficult in our minds. And so we felt more of a light industrial use could fit here. And we have seen some examples in other cities where you have a property that's, next to essentially a freeway, but then the access isn't great. That they've gone with a use like this. And the other consideration here is that you don't have any residential neighbors, right? It's either the Mountain View corridor or you've got commercial uses around it. So you're not at least directly impacting any residential uses.
Okay, thank you.
This is a particular request of great interest to me because I remember very distinctly the experience I went through when the proposal for the Hunter Town Center was made. Some statements were made by the property owner at the time regarding this issue that ended up misleading me significantly on what was happening on the property. And that turned out not to work out very well. But I have always remembered that, and given that the property owner is now requesting that we fix something, and my comments are maybe he should have been thinking more long-term when he came in the first time. So in case you're missing it, I am not supportive of this request, period. I don't do that very often, but I still remember that experience, and I am still unhappy with the information that was given to me. So
Well, Mayor,
I just want to make it clear so you know where I stand.
I can sympathize with you, but what if this property had changed hands and it was a different property owner? I mean, do you find or think of a better use for this property, or should just stay weeds forever?
Property owners are pretty inventive. There are other uses that could be made here. If they're not convenient, that does not necessarily sway me. Or if the access isn't what it should have been. The property owner knew that when they did the other issues relating to this property, so I'm fine. That's not saying that I'm trying to sway any of you to any particular viewpoint. This is a personal one for me, so you all do what you think is best. I don't have many of these, but this is one.
The reason why, Mayor?
I'm sorry, the reason why what?
Yeah. The reason
Why
why?
it's personal?
Yeah, why for this one?
Because the statements I felt were made in such a way that I did not get the information I needed to make an informed decision.
But at the same time, you see that Steve Patrick is residential in there, is not walk-in.
Yeah.
His commercial C2 is not walk-in.
Well, like I said, I will not be offended by anyone's vote on this. I'm just making it clear my vote.
Yeah.
I got a whole week to think about it.
Okay. Understand.
Any other comments on this particular one?
I do, and you could hear me if
Yes.
I unmuted myself. So I have a question for Mr. Pastrick. On the ordinance, they cannot have their garage doors or their manufacturing doors face towards a major arterial street. So there was a comment in there that their doors are not, their warehouse doors are not going to face the new highway. But to me, I would rather have them on the highway side than on the storage unit side. So was there a good reason, or is there a reason why we're not allowing them to do that?
So we actually did provide a way for them to do that. So along with the ordinance change to amend the general plan and the ordinance change for the zoning, there's also a development agreement. And if
Okay,
the development agreement's passed, that would allow them to put overhead doors on that west side facing Mountain View, but they would have to include some additional design requirements beyond what's in the ordinance to kind of spruce up that side of the building.
okay,
So that if the development agreement's passed, they would be able to do that.
okay. Thank you.
Hearing no further comments? Okay. No further comments, then we'll move on to communications, and we have a local scapes discussion. And Wayne, who's going to handle this? I don't see anyone waiting in the queue, so.
I
You?
think Steve's going to handle this one, Mayor.
Oh,
as well.
there he is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. And yeah,
the pictures jump around some, so I get confused.
just pulling up my second presentation here. So this is a topic we've actually discussed with the council a number of times. And so some of these slides will probably look familiar to you in that we've discussed this topic on several occasions. So first of all, just taking a step back and looking at this from the 30,000 foot perspective. So as a reminder, when you look at water consumption in the state, outdoor residential water use, so essentially irrigation of residential yards, is 6% of all water consumption in the state. And then indoor use or indoor residential use is 4%. So pardon the phrase, but by reducing reducing the amount of water used in residential landscapes is a bit of a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things in the state. So just putting that in perspective.
Steve,
Yes.
before you leave that, with all of the construction that has taken place replacing farms and pastures, I'm surprised that this is still at 82%. Or is this statewide?
This is for the whole state.
Oh, okay. So that is not true for West Valley City.
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to be looking at is West Valley City impact, not the entire state,
Sure.
because it's going to affect our residents for the cost of their water if we don't make reductions. So I think we need to do one that's a little bit more true to our actual circumstances in the city.
Okay. And so just as a reminder for the council, so the what we have in the ordinance right now, you see the section there. So we have standards that apply to all new single family homes. We only have landscaping requirements in the front yard. And if we actually don't require a permit if someone wanted to go in and change their landscaping, while we do have standards, there's no permit required for making changes. And so what we have in the ordinance now is in the front yard, there's a requirement that there be at least one tree, and then you can have a combination of the three things listed. So it can be lawn, shrubs, or ground cover, meaning you actually don't have to have lawn in your front yard. And when you look at ground cover, this next slide just explains what that ground cover could look like. So in essence, of the ground cover area, at least half of it needs to be some type of live plant material. So it can't just be all rock or all bark. It needs to have some plant material in it. But the point being that the code currently actually does allow localscapes to be installed. It just doesn't require localscapes. So just wanted to make that point.
In your annuals, does that include vegetable plants in your front yard? Permitted?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
So one of the other things that we did look at and actually have in the ordinance as a reminder is the council did adopt the residential sustainability zone, where in that situation, we actually did require localscapes as well as more water efficient fixtures on the inside of the house. But the way we did that, particularly on the inside of the house, was through a development agreement. So if a developer wanted to pursue the residential sustainability zone, then they would essentially sign up for a development agreement and commit to putting in more efficient fixtures on the inside of the house. I know in our discussion last week, or the council discussion last week, there was a brief mention about water fixtures on the inside. So just as a reminder, the city can't require more efficient fixtures than what's in state code, unless, again, the developer opts in, again, like with the residential sustainability zone, where they are essentially agreeing to commit by way of development agreement to a higher standard.
So does that mean the legislature would have to change that?
Well, it just means that at least on the inside of the house, if we wanted to require something that's more than what's in the state building code, a developer would have to essentially agree to do that in exchange for example, in the RS zone, it's to get 8,000 square foot lots. They would commit to do that in exchange for doing some of these efficiency standards.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then again, there was also, just again with the RS zone, we had some of those things built in terms of energy efficiency, but also water efficiency. And then, and I apologize for the small font here, but we put in the localscapes standards in the RS zone, again, realizing that a developer would agree to do these by development agreement. Now, the difference here is that if the council wanted, unlike the inside of the house where this deals with landscaping outside, we can by ordinance put in essentially a localscapes type ordinance for residential use if that's the desire of the council. So the state building code issue that I raised really deals with the inside of the house. When it comes to landscaping, if we wanted to have a localscapes type standard in the ordinance, we can do that. And this just goes through the types of things you look at. So you would cap the amount of lawn that could be there, not allow lawn to be in narrow spaces so that it would be watered efficiently. Prevent lawn on steeper slopes. Again, it's an irrigation issue. Only have spray type irrigation in where you have lawn, and then using drip or bubbler irrigation in other locations. And you can see some of the other standards. So these are in the code, but again, they only apply in the residential sustainability zone. So just a few considerations for the council. So as I mentioned up front, when it comes to the inside, we can't currently require more stringent water efficiency for the inside of the house beyond state code, again, unless the developer signs up for that in exchange for something else. There's also a question about if we went with localscapes, who we would want to install that. Right now for residential landscaping, you have the option of the home builder or the homeowner installing that. But where localscapes can be a little bit more involved or more complicated than just doing, say, an all lawn or all sod front yard, that's a consideration. Localscapes can require more maintenance. Again, just given the level of complexity in the types of plants that you do versus saying, just having to mow a front lawn. There's another question, if we were to adopt standards, would that apply to the entire yard? Or right now our standards apply just to the front yard, and we actually don't require landscaping in the rear yard. So if we were to go with a standard, would that apply to just the front yard or in the entire yard? There's the question about inspecting to make sure and who's doing that. And then there's also just kind of the ongoing challenge of, let's say that a home builder puts in a localscapes landscape, and then 5 years later the home is sold and the new owner wants to put in just all grass. Are we, is the city going to try to enforce those kinds of situations down the road? So just a few things for consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, maybe I have a question. In many cases, when we talk about, residences, single family homes, oftentimes there are options put on there. I know when it's a big complex, you have options you can add in to get points. You have to have so many points. I guess we don't do that on single family residences, although we do require a number of changes, variations. But could you do something like that with this to say, this is an option you can put in, and we require you to do something and you get to choose from a list. One of them could be that the contractor, home builder installs localscape. Is there a way of even doing that, or am I just lost in the bushes?
So we do actually have a point system for homes, so that in terms of architectural features, so a home builder can choose from a list of different features for a home, so that it's not just a really basic box. And something like this, where we would have an option for the home builder, seems like maybe something we could potentially put in a development agreement, where we would say, because we have in some situations by development agreement had the home builder actually install the landscaping in at least the front yard. So in situations like that, we could say, if the home builder's installing it, then we want them to do at least so many elements of localscapes as part of their development agreement, would be one possibility.
Okay. Well, I just thought I would throw that out there. I know the legislature is toying with changing some of that. So, but I don't think that they were going to restrict landscaping, but can't remember now.
Yeah, so in HB 98, as it's written right now, it would still allow the cities to have landscaping regulations in the front yard, which is what we currently have. But it would not allow regulations beyond the front yard.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where that is. We'll get a report on that here in a few minutes, I think, in our legislative report. I just mentioned that because that may be something that we might consider. I know that there's been talk about adopting it as an ordinance and requiring it, but another option is to put it in there with the point system as one of the things that could be done. Anyway, thank you.
And then Steve, I have a question about, couldn't we put something on the title about the landscape and have ordinance enforcement enforce that, since we already have them, if somebody tries to change their landscape?
As far as having code enforcement, yes, it really just becomes an issue of because there's no permit required for someone to to change their landscaping, it would have to be done on more of a complaint basis, or if just the city catches that, right? And so particularly if it's like in the backyard, that'd be really difficult for us to even know about it. But in the front yard, it really just then becomes an issue of staffing, and if it becomes a big enough issue, being able to enforce something in mass.
Yeah, I just thought ordinance could do that as part of their thing. And then the other thing was, there are quite a few people that want to change their front yards from all lawn to a local scape, but we do not allow them to go down to a true local scape configuration, 35% lawn and then or green, and then other items that don't need water. So I didn't know if there was an appetite for that also for those who want to change out their park strip to non-watering because of the inefficiency of less than 8 feet of lawn. And then whether or not we wanted to allow people who want to do a local scape to have less green. I didn't know if there was an appetite for that.
So I can address both those. So with the park strip, we actually don't require any plant material in the park strip. Now, there are a handful of exceptions, and we have certain developments where there were street trees, for example, required in a development agreement. But beyond that, at park strip, we've seen people do stamped concrete or just gravel. So that actually is allowed in the park strip. In the front yard, so actually on the person's lot, in the front yard, from our view, you can do local scapes because of the area that's landscaped. So if you take out the driveway, right, whatever's left, 50% of that needs to be live plant material. So that could be lawn, or it could be something else entirely. So if, one possibility, if the council feels like 50% is too high of a percentage, we could lower that to where they don't have to have as much plant material. But we feel like 50% is a good balance there. And what we're talking about when we say 50% is when you, let's say you plant shrubs, once those are fully grown, we look at the area that those cover. And does that, take up 50% of that landscape area?
Okay.
You could plant a maple tree in the middle of your yard and just fill it in with bark, and you'd fulfill the 50% requirement.
Except we don't count the tree canopy, right? So,
We don't count the tree.
right, the tree canopy doesn't count, but things like shrubs or like flowers or ornamental grasses, those kinds of things would count. But yeah, the tree canopy itself, we don't count in that 50%.
So I think the one directing question would be if we want to change the 50% requirement. Another question would be if we want to apply any changes to existing homes or just new developments. And then if we did, what those changes would be. As far as, if we put this on ordinance enforcement and some things apply to homes built after 2021 and other things don't, in 5 years, they're going to have a hard time enforcing anything because houses have different requirements based on when they were built.
I'm pretty sure that our computer system would allow us to make that easy call. And if it's just a standard, whether it's a new build or an existing, and you put the local scape and you have to have a minimum of 35%, I think that would be pretty good because we've never had where you have 0% green. So 35 would be the lowest minimum, or 40. And that way it'd be really easy to just know that's what the standard is citywide. You can't have less than 35% green, no matter when it's built. So if you have 50%, you're safe. And if you have 35%, you're safe. I don't think that would have to matter when the house was built.
So you'd be more in favor of just changing the percentage?
Yeah, as a good start, yes. Because there's a lot of people that come to the classes out at Jordan Valley that then can't take that information home and apply it because we have the 50%.
Well, they can almost apply it, right?
Almost, yep. But their goal, I mean, a lot of people, it costs a lot of money to convert your yard over this. And that's why for existing homes, it doesn't make sense. If you put it in to begin with, it's a lesser cost than having to go back and rehab it. And there's people that just would rather pay the money and use less water and be more environmentally friendly. And we're going to be running out of water soon. So those water costs to build new facilities is going to up our rates quite a bit to be able to afford those. So if we could put it off to 2060 before we need those new resources instead of 2045, I think that's a good benefit to the state and to our area right here for our residents.
Well, a couple of questions, Mr. Pastrick. The tree canopy, at one point, wasn't that included?
Mm-mm.
No, never?
No, and
Boy, I got some bad information then, because, well, I'll take that discussion offline. The other thing is, the comment I would make is if we change the percentage of, ground cover or whatever term you use for the grass, shrubs, bushes, I think we ought to also re-examine what other materials they're allowed to put in that are not ground cover. Just to make sure that that's somewhat limited, because we still want our neighborhoods to look nice. Grass is a very easy thing to make it look nice. And I think we would have to put in some requirements if they put down bark. What does that mean? I know it's supposed to be at least 4 inches or whatever. But if someone puts bark in and 20 years later, it looks like a yard of trash. So I think if we're going to make changes, we've got to look at it holistically. We've got to re-examine all of the things and say, what will this look like 10 years, 20 years down the road? Now, I know people redo their yards, pretty easy to do, not so expensive, but I still think we need to look at those just to make sure as we do it. The other thing, there is 2 ways of looking at the water conservation. In some respects, 2 schools of thought. One that, Karen, that you mentioned. The other is, wouldn't it be better to build out those sources of water now? You can always conserve in the future, but in the future, when you build those new facilities, it's going to cost 10 times more. Wouldn't it be better to do it now?
So the state of Utah has put a requirement on all of the water suppliers to cut water usage by 25% by 2025. So that started in 2000 of what the use was in 2000 to 2025. And then, so that has to be done anyway, whether it prolongs before we have to do a new build or not. And,
Well, there are many approaches, many approaches. So from our discussion, is there any specific proposal to staff? Or are we fine at this point?
I would like it to move forward and be able to have the new builds have some conservation and be able to allow those with existing landscapes to change them to a lower percentage of lawn. And then still require the bubbles and the non-overhead spraying of the plant material, the shrubs and the perennials and that kind of stuff.
I'm okay with that too. That sounds reasonable, Karen.
It's 2.
I agree.
3,
Thank you.
4. Okay, would you feel comfortable if we also take a look at the types of material that are placed there? Just to re-examine the non-vegetation items, just to make sure. I'm not proposing any particular change, but while we're doing that, I would like to look at that if that's okay. And have staff say, what can we do that will continue to keep, if you have less green area, what other things actually look attractive in a yard? And maybe even show us a couple of samples of that, where it's worked and where it hasn't.
So Mayor, I was waiting until I heard where the council's kind of position was on this before I even piped in at all. My only question I have to this whole thing, and I'm sorry to sound dense here, I still just don't even understand what the changes we're making. Everything you're talking about, at least is how Karen proposed it, is allowed right now, either for a new home or an existing home, at least as I understand it. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere here. So are we looking for proposals to maybe require this then, or is it still voluntary, or what's the actual change? Because let me give you an example. So a house existing or new right now, we already don't require you to have any landscaping in the backyard. Therefore, there's no added water usage there. And in the front yard, you can have up to 40% of your front yard in solid surface parking if you want. So that leaves 60% of the front yard. Of the 60%, half of that can be mulch, rock, or some other impermeable organic or non-organic material like that, which leaves, as I understand it, 30% of the front lawn, which then is required to have some sort of covering vegetative material, whether that's vines, shrubs, just like Steve explained. Of that 30%, none of it, as I understand it, even has to be lawn.
Right.
So I'm still not understanding what we're trying to get to, I guess, through that example. And I may just be stuck on misunderstanding what the actual request is. So that's why I bring this up.
So right now in our non-hard surface, we have to have 50% green. I would just
Which
down to
equates to 30% of the front lawn, right? We're on the same page there.
Well, I would rather, instead of your non-concrete being 50%, have it be 30% of the non-concrete. So that
That's
makes
what it is right now, as I understand.
Steve in his presentation says 50%.
50% of the 60%. If you take 40% out because that's parking, that leaves 60%. Half of that is the 50% Steve's talking about, right, Steve?
Yeah, I'd rather.
Right.
That makes 30% of the front lawn is required to have bushes, shrubs, trees, whatever. Don't even have to have any lawn.
So this 50% of the net lands, oh, he says net. Okay, so I'll do that in my head again later.
Yeah. So, let's run through it just because I think everybody could probably benefit from the calculation there. If you think about that front lawn, you're literally down to 30% of the front yard already right now, as our ordinance exists, is required to have that vegetation, 30%. And of that 30%, you don't even have to have any lawn. You can have all bushes, all shrubs, all local scape. And that might be another piece that I'm missing here. When I think of local scape or the definitions that have been, that I've seen demonstrated or whatever, that's what we're talking about, right? It still includes live plants, live vegetation, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Okay, so I think I'm straight there. But yeah, that's where I'm still sort of hung up of, I'm not really sure what we're bringing back.
So, and I guess that's my misunderstanding of the 60%, 50 of that being 30% of the entire front yard. And that's where my mathematics was not, I just get stuck on that 50% has to be landscaping.
Yeah, it only ends up being 30% because of the driveway. I think that's the part that kind of got left out. The driveway can be And, you know, sometimes it's not, but the owner would still have the option to make it up to 40%, use the 60%. Of the 60%, you only have to have half. That's the 50% Steve's talking about. And that
Right.
only actually equals 30% right now today.
Okay, so that's a good clarification. It just is misleading in the ordinance.
Yeah, it can be confusing for sure.
Yeah, so I think the 50% of the net is what throws it off. Everybody just sees the 50% of the landscape area. And like I did, that net in there kind of misleads, I guess.
Okay. All right. So maybe
So that-
some wording clarification. So it's just
Possibly
clear as
just-
to what we already do.
Yeah, because people are confused as to, they think they have to have 50% of their front yard landscape with plant material.
With plant material. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
Not-
correct.
Yeah, not
That's true.
50% of the non-hard surface.
Non-concrete. Right. Yeah. Or whatever the hard surface is.
Yeah, so there's that part. But then on the new developments, having all or a percentage have the local scape of the same thing, 35% of the net non-concrete. So that
So
is-
I
so we're just
think
not-
we're already there too. Is that right, Steve? Or would we need to change the ordinance for new development?
If we wanted it to where they're not doing any more than that, then that would be a change.
Okay,
Right
so
now-
that would be a requirement, not a voluntary. That's the other part that I'm
Yeah,
making sure I'm clear on. So you're proposing that we would require new single-family residential to not have more than the 30
or 35%.
or 35, whatever it is. And everything else had to be either concrete or bark mulch rock. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, is the rest of the council on board with
And then-
that?
And then also requiring, no overhead spraying on just the perennials, just the lawn have the overhead spraying, individual feeder tubes to the shrub, whatever. Just to make it so we're not still just spraying water everywhere.
Gotcha. Okay, so how's that look right now in our new development ordinance, Steve? Would that require a change for the irrigation definition?
It would, yes. For
Okay.
single family, yes.
Okay,
Okay, so the result is that ultimately you want to have 17.5% of the front yard be green material, plant material.
no, I think she's still, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just saying what I understand. You'd still be at the 35%. The difference is just you would propose that be required as opposed to it's currently up to the landowner.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, on the new
Okay.
development, just to start off on a better foot as far as
Well,
having,
Well, for
Yes.
the, I guess now I've gotten confused. So let's go back. We have 40%. We have then 25% and 25%, right? Or wait a minute, no.
No, we have 40%. Up to 40% is the driveway. The remaining
And
60%,
30
half
and
of that or 30% would be required. That's the maximum limit of green plant material, which I guess could include lawn as well, right, Karen? I mean, in
So
your mind.
are you keeping the same percentages, but you're just changing it to maximum?
Maximum, and that would be the upper limit allowed in new development. That's the way I understand it.
Okay,
and where they teach the classes, you do have a patch of lawn, and then the rest is
Right,
park with minimal, with perennials and whatever that has just the individual watering systems. And the lawn itself is the only overhead.
Yep.
so there are two changes. One is that currently it says 30, well, half of the non-concrete area, which is 30% of the yard,
right.
currently says it's a minimum. And you would change that to a maximum.
For new development only. We wouldn't change
New
the
development
existing
only.
yards.
We wouldn't
And-
change the existing.
Right. We would just make that
And
the new development.
Second, you would change the, what do you call it, the spray pattern, the
Yeah.
watering pattern, or the way it's watered?
to more of a,
irrigate-
to more of a drip irrigation system, I guess would be the way to
Yeah.
term that.
I mean, we've taken
Okay, and we're going to task the city with enforcing that? Or is this only on new construction and then after that it's open?
New construction.
Okay, so if someone buys a home after 3 years and tears that out and puts in something else, that's okay.
Yep, I don't know what we could do to change their mind to not. I mean, I think if we let them know when they buy the house that that's a requirement. If they want that situation, I think they'll buy the house. If they don't want that requirement, they may not. I don't know how you enforce it after if they change it back.
Well, they wouldn't even have to wait 3 years. Just the contractor does what they're doing. As soon as they have the keys, they do whatever they want to. But I think we're looking at a big change from saying local scaping is allowed to saying that now you can't put in a lawn.
You can put it in lawn, just
A
not.
little bit of
old.
lawn, but you can't. I mean, a lot of people, I think, still have the traditional idea. They've just bought their new when they want to put a big front lawn in. And I mean, I'm not going there with you.
Yeah, I think to keep our water bills low, and I think is the biggest incentive to move this forward.
Yeah, but people can decide if they're going to spend their money on water or on concrete or on bark or on trees or on what, right?
Well, if we
mean,
don't,
A little bit self-leveling. Once they decide, I don't want to pay money to water this whole lawn, they're going to do something else.
and at that point, it will cost them a good 15,000 to convert it over to local scape instead of having local scape and being a good citizen with conservation. And it will raise everybody in the city's water bill, not just the guy who has, so the bigger
And-
lawn.
I'm completely there with encouraging it and providing information for great ideas and pretty landscapes. I'm just not today making the shift from allowing it to requiring it. It's a big shift for me.
It is, but it's really good for the environment.
Really good for the environment.
So we don't have to go build a dam in a canyon to block off water so that we have enough water to water our lawns instead of, I mean, the fact that we're going to have to build new facilities for water is going to raise our water bills. If we can conserve water and not need those facilities, then we'll be better off.
So
So you
this
don't
only
build-
applies to single family residents. And so if someone puts in an apartment complex, this does not apply.
No, single family residents. I would encourage that we change the requirements for high density to the indoor plumbing requirements so that, because their big use is indoor use, which the per acre use goes up a ton when you're putting all those people, but it's all indoor. So the water smart toilets, faucets, things like that would be the best requirement for them to help cut down on the water use.
Wait a minute. One thing I don't want is a smart toilet. I have enough problem with my phone.
Okay, a water
I
efficient.
like the manual, non-smart, idiot toilet.
Okay, the water efficient toilet. That's what I should have said. Sorry.
Okay.
Water efficient.
There
indoor-
are smart toilets in
Yes.
Germany. Okay.
You
Well,
don't
they're
want
here
the internet so you can share with your social media group.
now.
Nope.
So that's why it was kind of a two-edge, get the indoor stuff where we can and then get the outdoor water saving where we can to just make
Okay.
it so that we can do better with the water we have now, the water sources we have now.
I think we've clarified that, but I
Okay.
think before we have an actual resolution on our agenda, I would like to take that and have staff look at it and tell us what kind of impact it is in our city.
Okay.
So that we can see and understand, how much difference is this making, and recognizing that we only have so much land left to develop, and only a certain portion of that is going to be developed into single family residences. How much of an impact is this? What will it do? Just so I have some perspective, because I looked at that other thing that we first saw, and it's kind of like, gee, if we get a 0.5%, we'd be lucky. It wouldn't be, it'd be less than that. And what will this mean? I would also like to know what the cost will add to a home
Okay.
that is being marketed. I mean, it's not a lot, but is that okay to just get that information along with it?
Yeah,
Come back
sure.
and present that, and then
Yeah,
see
Yeah.
if we're all together.
no problem there, Mayor. My only other procedural question, I just want to make sure we still have 4 folks that want to move this forward, given the clarification of where we were going. Are we still there?
Oh, here, let me say it again. So the formula we have right now, currency proposed is a 40-60 and 60-30. Is that right?
Yes, required, not voluntary.
Yeah.
Well, there's no change in percentages, right?
Right, so same, yes,
Just goes minimum to maximum.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
So there
I'm
were
not-
4.
I withdraw my support. I don't think that this is going in the direction that I thought it might, and so I'm not gung ho on this right now.
And again, like I say, it's easy for us to pull together the information, so I'm not trying to get out of that. I just wanted to make sure we were all understanding together exactly what we're talking about. That was my only thrust there.
Yeah, that formula, I'm okay with that. But also give the people option. They want to do whatever they want to do. They can have more.
Okay,
But
if any of you can hear me, I'm having computer problems, so if I drop out, I'll jump back in somehow.
Okay, Mayor.
And we can hear you, but you've just frozen up visually.
Yeah. Your screen froze, but we can still hear you. All right, so as I understand it then, we've got only 3, not 4. I pardon, Tom, I think you broke up a little bit, so I wasn't sure if you were still in support of looking at it or not.
Yeah, I'm still supporting her for that. But here the option is if people, they want to do more grass, they give them an option to do that, correct?
No, this would limit people. You could have a maximum 30% of grass and that's all.
It's all right.
Okay, well, all right, very good. So we're still at 3. Maybe I'll let Karen go lobby a couple of you on the side. Like I said, but yeah, let us know. We're fine whenever or however you want us to bring that back. But for as of right now, I'm going to take this down in terms of notes so we remember and we've got it clearly in mind kind of where we would be going if it's brought up again and we have support. But as of right now, as I understand it, we're not moving forward. Okay. Okay, I think we lost the mayor maybe.
We did. It said
Okay.
he left the meeting.
Well, I think he'll probably join us here in a minute.
Yeah,
Oh,
there he is.
Okay, good. Mary, you back on?
It looks like maybe his audio isn't connected, so I'm not sure if he's just trying to do that or He may be dialing in, but I'll keep an eye out.
Okay, I think that we could safely move on to the next item, which is being a great pet owner. And let the mayor join us there.
Sounds good. I know Lane's out there. There he is. I see his screen.
Did I miss something there?
There we go.
Am I up?
Yes,
Yes, Lane.
Oh, all right. Thanks. Sorry.
You are, but your picture isn't.
Well, we'll work on that.
Lane, I'll go ahead. It's Eric. I'll go ahead and share my screen with your picture.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Mayor,
Yours went to black and white pixelation.
Eric's got it there. Thank you, Eric. Mayor and council, probably 15 years ago, we created a pamphlet called 12 Elements of a Great Neighborhood. You probably have seen it. We use it as a tool for educating the public on our expectations as a community for what makes a neighborhood great. And as we've kind of reviewed the different materials that we put out, the thought occurred to us that, hey, maybe we should do the same thing for what makes a great pet owner. So the idea behind this pamphlet we've created is to be used as a tool to explain standards and expectations from our society to some of the folks who don't understand or come from different places and don't have the same expectations when it comes to pets or the same understanding of what
Lane,
we value in pets.
Lane, can I jump in with a question right now?
Please,
Is this something you're already distributing or you're showing us to get the okay?
we're showing that we have not started distributing it. We've got a couple more little tweaks that we need to make, but we're about 90% of the way there. So I am happy to take any input you would like to offer.
I have a question, maybe some discussion then after your presentation. Thanks.
All right. Well, I don't have much of a presentation here other than to explain what we're doing, and you can see the see if I can get to page 2 here. Oh, if I can get you to get to page 2. First of all, I got to thank Miranda Weatherman, who is our very fine animal services director, who's responsible for most of the content. And then, of course, Craig Thomas is our layout guy. And so these are the 14 things that we would like to send out. We'll be sending these out with courtesy notices from Animal Services. They'll be available in Craig's office and other locations throughout the city for people to distribute, to start discussions, to inform people of what our existing ordinances are and expectations are when it comes to especially some of the higher impact animals or pets that are present in our city, mostly dogs and cats. So I kind of put them in what seems to me to be a priority order based on the complaints we get, the questions we get. Hopefully, as we get this out there, it'll answer more questions than it raises. But the fact that Steve has a question already tells me maybe that's not so. anytime you want to go, Steve.
Okay, so just a couple of items on how many pets you can have. I mean, insects and fish. An aquarium with only 4 fish is pretty lonely, and an ant farm with only 4 ants is pretty lonely. And I don't think we're really out there enforcing that. I guess you could have free range ants. I have plenty at my house without even trying to feed them or encourage their breeding or anything else. But maybe we just take fish and insects off without having to do an ordinance change.
Well, I appreciate that input. We kind of argued this back and forth amongst ourselves, whether it was necessary to list spiders, reptiles, lizards, and snakes, and things like that. Because you're right, we're not out there knocking on the door saying we hear your kid has an ant farm, and it's way over on the number of ants you can have.
Well, I think lizards and snakes is probably okay. I've had a snake at my house, but and 4 would be a lot. But I mean, I'm just looking at the insects and the fish.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm wondering where the pigs are.
Yeah, where are the pot-bellied pigs? Because those aren't allowed.
The pigs are on there. They're listed there. Cats, dogs, ferrets,
Where?
and pot-bellied pigs.
Not on the one that we have.
They're,
Where's that? Okay. Oh, right there, the first sentence. Okay.
Oh, but we have a whole list.
I know it should be in the easy to read
Okay.
list, right?
So dogs and cats aren't in that list either, is what you're saying. Neither are ferrets.
Yeah.
So
the first paragraph just lists the animals that need to be licensed with the city, and then the easy list there is just everything else that you can have as a pet.
Gotcha.
So can you license your animal or relicense online yet?
You can, yes.
You can. So I
Yeah.
think that should be on the licensing part as to where you go to renew or get a license for your animal.
That's a great point. Yeah, we will get that in there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
You can use the space that you gain by taking out insects and fish.
we actually, Craig had a great suggestion. We have we'll pull out on the first page some of the other phone numbers and do a frequently asked question list to deal with some of these things that come up. But we really started it with the number of pets, and then dogs, and dogs barking. And then cats are really our main issues that we deal with. And frankly, there are many people that just don't understand culturally our general attitude towards dogs, and that dogs shouldn't bark, and that cats shouldn't be running through the neighborhood and tearing up people's flower bed. And I know it seems pretty basic to some of us, but there are frequently, we have a lot of cultures that are represented here in West Valley City where a good dog barking is a good thing, lets everybody know there's a dog there and it's a part of a security thing. So education is the primary goal of this. There are a lot of cat people that seem to think that it's perfectly acceptable to simply open the door and let their cat out to do whatever. And that's just what cats do, and everyone needs to be a hold of that. I think we all know crazy cat people like that. So I'll take some of those. I'll take those suggestions, and we'll tweak this, and then we'll get it printed up and start handing that out if there's no other suggestions.
Looks like we've got the mayor back. But you're muted.
You are muted, Mayor.
Okay, it looks like my internet connection is bad. Would you believe I couldn't even call in on the phone there for a bit? Anyway, so that took care of that. I got to get back where I was. I think next on our agenda, are we ready to go there? The legislative update. Thank you for being patient with me.
Hi, Mayor. How are you? Well, thanks for the opportunity to give what will be probably the last update of this legislative session. You end on Friday. So thanks for the opportunity. I'll kind of try and run through these quickly. A couple bills that we've been paying particular attention to. Obviously, I presented to the council a few times on House Bill 98, which was Paul Ray's bill dealing with building inspections and design standards. After they did reach some consensus with many local governmental entities, that bill is moving its way through the process. It's already passed out of the House, was presented in Senate committee today and passed out of Senate committee. The Senate wasn't working on House bills today on the Senate reading calendar, so they'll be moving to House bills starting tomorrow. And it's likely this bill will be coming up relatively quickly tomorrow in order for the Senate to do full consideration. At this point, I think the bill has been negotiated to the point in which it won't be negotiated much more. So I think it's in its final form and will likely pass the Senate based on the committee hearing today. In addition to 98, House Bill 82, which was the accessory dwelling unit bill, was again another bill that we heavily negotiated. And in talking with both Nicole and Steve, it sounds like we negotiated to a point in which this bill will not have a significant impact on many of our residential single-family home zones that we have within the city. So I think we did a pretty nice job of making sure that we amended that bill to the point in which it won't have a huge impact within the city where we still have some development that may occur. A couple other bills that you should be aware of that have found an ignominious death, House Bill 342, which was a bill that dealt with, which would have required local governments to go through and essentially catalog all enterprises that they engage in that can be perceived to be conflicting with the private sector, meaning that there's some competitive aspect with the private sector. This is a bill that was a huge concern for the city, and we were successful in getting that bill killed. So it was returned to rules today, never even got a House committee hearing for consideration. The same fate was reached with House Bill 401, which was a bill that would require all development fees to be individually cataloged and individually accounted for each specific project. So in essence, you couldn't commingle any funds that were collected on development fees. They would have to be isolated by project and accounted for in that process. And we were successful in killing that bill as well. So that was House Bill 401. Some of the big funding bills that we were working on both today and this week, the most significant today, House Bill 433, which is the omnibus bonding bill and transportation funding bill, did pass out of the House today overwhelmingly and is off to the Senate for further consideration. This bill takes about $700 million worth of cash out of the $1.4 billion surplus, and then couples that with some bonding authorization to do about $2 billion worth of transportation projects throughout the state. Salt Lake County did relatively well in that process, especially when you consider it in context with House Bill 244, which was Representative Dunnigan's bill that specifically allocated transportation funding to individual cities within Salt Lake County. So there was about $128 million that went out to individual cities in a formula type process. And again, West Valley City did very well in that process. So we'll be getting about $15 million over the lifetime of this bill and the authorization in this legislation. Couple that with a couple $100 million that will be coming to communities within Salt Lake County out of that bonding bill. There's going to be a lot of orange cones this spring and summer in relationship to transportation investment here within Salt Lake County. And then the last bill that I'll quickly highlight is Senate Bill 201. This is a bill that we've been working on dealing with public notices. As many of you are aware, as the newspapers have gone from daily publication to weekly publication, many of our public notice requirements that we have under statute no longer really comport well with the business model that's been changed by the newspaper agencies. And so with those changes, what we have done with the help of Senator Maine has gone through and moved all the public notices onto an online portal where individuals can go and access those same public notices. But the requirement of public agencies to submit those and pay for those to be put in the newspaper will no longer exist. And so another big win for us there on Senate Bill 201. With that, Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions. As you've seen from the tracking sheet, we're certainly tracking far more bills than what I just described, but those are some of the key highlights from this week as we enter the home stretch, and we'll be done at midnight on Friday. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and thanks for the time.
Okay. Well, I missed about 90% of what Lincoln said. I lost my connection again, but I'm back now for a couple minutes. I'm gonna have to do some checking. I just don't know what's going on. Anyway, thank you, Lincoln. Appreciate that. Any further comments, council, questions? And if
Thanks for your good.
Oh,
Thanks,
okay,
everyone.
maybe
Thanks,
you
Mayor.
already did that. So, okay. Then we'll move on here. Okay. Then we have our council calendar. Potential future agenda items. Not hearing any council reports.
One thing I'd like to report on, Mayor. I was notified today by Granger High School that they will be hosting a 9/11 exhibit to honor all of the fallen first responders between March 15th and the 18th there at the school. Then on the 19th, they'll be doing a hero walk. It might be something we want Sam to check on and possibly get into the, getting some information out on it so that other than the Granger High student body will know about it. So just pass that on to you, Wayne. I see Sam isn't on right now, but he might be able to follow up with that.
Okay. And then Lars had something.
Thanks, Mayor. The audit committee met this past week and received the report on the audit for fiscal year 2019-2020. And it was really great news. We should applaud the finance department and all of the staff for another successful year, especially with all the challenges we had near the end of that fiscal year. So congratulations to our staff and the good job that they're doing.
Anyone else? Hearing nothing else, there's no need for a closed session. So there we've come to the end of our agenda. I just hope I can participate in regular meeting in a little while. Okay, then a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Without objection, we'll stand adjourned. And hearing no objection, the voting's unanimous. Thank you. See you in a while.